Hare Krishna. Welcome to another evening episode in the lives of the Vaisnava Acharyas. My name is Chaturatma Das. If you're watching this recording, keep in mind that it is just that, a recording. There is no live chat room. That while this is being presented, I'm actually in Vrindavan and trying to absorb myself in the pastimes of Krishna there and the association of devotees there. So we have pre-recorded this session for your pleasure. Tonight we're going to speak about two devotees that precede Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but are intimately connected with Mahaprabhu's mission, and as a matter of fact, very clearly are the flow chart, if you will, the line of current of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's development of love for God. And those two individuals would be Madhavendra Puri and Ishvara Puri. Madhavendra Puri, of course, being the spiritual master of Ishvara Puri, and Ishvara Puri being the spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, of course, we'll start with Madhavendra Puri. Whenever the king of Braja, Sri Krishna Nandana, makes his appearance on this earth, prior to that he sends his elders, his seniors, to prepare the scene. Just as here in America right now, we're in the midst of a big political year with elections of presidential figures, and there are many debates and public engagements. So whenever one of these takes place, of course, the candidates first, they send some of their advance party. You go and scope out the place, be sure that this is the way I like, that is there. Be sure to bring in this one and this one to be the backup people. I like to have this one to assist and prepare. And in this way, they make all their different arrangements. So if this is what takes place in a mundane realm, simply for the position of some mundane president of some tiny little country on some singular planet in this vast universe, which is only 1/4 of the creation, then what to speak of when the Lord himself brings his pastimes to this planet? He sends those personalities who are his intimate associates ahead of him to arrange things, prepare things, set the mood, to prepare the arena, if you will. Now, some of these personalities we know to be, as I'm mentioning, Madhavendra Puri, Ishvara Puri, Matasachi, Jagannath Mishra, Advaita Acharya. These are personalities that appeared specifically for that purpose to the Lord. And in this way, they engage in their own pastimes with the Lord and with each other in preparing that. So we see that this arranging of the arena is a very important part, because the Lord does not do anything haphazardly. His appearance is a very carefully orchestrated arrangement, just as any temple that has a large festival. Everything is very, very carefully arranged. How many chairs will be there, who will prepare what prasadam, what will the menu, what day will it be bought so that this can be cut on that day, so that it can, in this way, coordinating all these things. So in the same way, the Lord's pastime is like that. Now, Madhavendra Puri, he is understood to be the disciple of Lakshmipati Tirtha. Lakshmipati Tirtha is the guru also of Nityananda. And we'll talk a little later about the exchanges between Nityananda and Madhavendra Puri. So there is here again, as we visually see this picture starting to form before our eyes, a very clear connection between the different personalities. Lakshmipati initiates Madhavendra Puri and Nityananda. Nityananda and Madhavendra Puri have a very similar mood of devotional service. Nityananda becomes the personal associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the disciple of the most intimate disciple of Madhavendra. So everything is connected in this way. Madhavendra Puri, of course, had some prominent sannyasi disciples. Among those, as we mentioned, Ishvara Puri, but Advaita Acharya was also his disciple. Paramananda Puri, Brahmananda Puri, Sri Ranga Puri, Pundarik Vidanidhi, Raghupati, many others in this way. Now, of these disciples and of the followers of Madhavendra Puri, Advaita Acharya and Ishvara Puri were his chief most disciples, the most prominent of his followers. And in this way, in one way or another, all the Vaishnavas of Bengal and Orissa were somehow connected with Madhavendra Puri, and ultimately with the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And even those that were the followers of Madhavendra Puri, that after the appearance of Mahaprabhu, and of course the disappearance of Madhavendra Puri, they also became intimately involved in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So once again, we see this wonderful way that everything is very much connected. Now, Madhavendra Puri is, how do you say, he's essential in the mood that Mahaprabhu will manifest. Prior to the appearance of Madhavendra Puri in the Brahma Sampradaya, there was no presence of conjugal ras. Conjugal ras, of course, meaning the intimate loving affairs between Krishna and his devotees, primarily, of course, the gopis. That this was not an aspect of our teachings. So, I mean, it was understood as part of this is not the mood of the acharyas at that time. Madhavendra Puri himself brought in that mood of conjugal relationships. It mentions that even something as simple as seeing a dark rain cloud would cause Madhavendra Puri to fall into an ecstatic trance at the remembrance of Sri Krishna, his Supreme Lord. That the mood of Krishna Prema would develop in him. This is told by Vrindavan Das Thakur in his Chaitanya Bhagavat. So he introduced this Madhurya Bhav into the entire Sampradaya. Thus, the concept of Prema Bhakti began to establish itself in our Sampradaya. Now, so important is Madhavendra Puri that his name was attached to our Sampradaya. Brahma Madhva Sampradaya. Now, of course, eventually to become Brahma Madhva Gaudiya, followers of Lord Chaitanya. But Brahma created our Sampradaya, and then Madhavendra Puri became the prominent implementer. So, in this way, the Brahma Madhva, and of course Madhva also meaning Madhvacharya, who we spoke later, but we can see this connection there in that way, that this introduction into the mood of conjugal ras was there. So it mentions that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became this towering tree, that the sprout of this tree of devotional service, this tree of Prema Bhakti, was Madhavendra Puri. And the young sapling of that was Ishvara Puri. But that the full manifestation of that full tree of devotional service was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This mood that Madhavendra Puri brought, this mood of separation, Vipralambra Bhav, this was previously not so much known. We'll speak a little bit more about that later. But, you know, this was the introduction that he became very much appreciated for, and the significance of his appearance in our line. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur mentions that this feeling of separation from Krishna is the only way by which the spirit soul can practice the path of perfection in going back to Godhead, this mood of feeling himself separated from Krishna. Material feelings of separation, you know, these give rise to a despondent mood, and one becomes, you know, depressed or overwhelmed, and, you know, attachment for some mundane material subject like that. But when we take those same moods and attach those to the source of all feelings, Sri Krishna himself, then this actually benefits us and brings the proof of the highest mood of pleasure in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is, again, the introduction of Madhavendra Puri. So, the nature of Madhavendra Puri's devotional service was appreciated very much because of this. His way of imparting this was not received by all of his disciples equally. How is it that Ishvara Puri was able to imbibe this? It mentions that as Madhavendra Puri wound down his pastimes, that, well, actually we'll go into that a little bit separately. First, let's talk about, as Madhavendra Puri is, his birth is, there's not much known about him. Where he appeared and his early activities. We do find that he accepted sannyas and traveled very widely throughout India. And in some of those travels, we found that he went to Vrindavan. And when traveling in Vrindavan, he went to Govardhan. And while traveling in Govardhan, he had his sannyasi associates with him. And when traveling in Govardhan, he met that most supremely wonderful personality, Lord Nityananda. The two of them met in Govardhan. it mentions that the body of Madhavendra Puri was surcharged with love for Krishna. And of course, Nityananda is the personality of Godhead manifest himself. So when Madhavendra Puri was traveling in this way throughout Vrindavan, it mentions that there was no food that he partook of except the mellows of love for Sri Krishna. He's fasting in this way. So at some point, Madhavendra Puri and Nityananda meet each other in Govardhan, and upon seeing each other, they both lost consciousness and fell to the ground, fainting in ecstasy on the side of the other. So it mentions that as soon as they came to external consciousness, they began to embrace each other. And embracing each other in this way, they began to cry tears of joy and appreciation and love upon seeing each other, so much so that both of their bodies became completely drenched. Now you have these two grown men embracing each other, crying great tears of ecstasy, completely drenching their body in this way. The associates, the disciples of Madhavendra Puri, are greatly amazed by this. Now, they're not thinking any weird thoughts or anything like we do in modern society at this, but they're amazed at appreciating, because they are trained in the principles of devotional service, and they can appreciate these. They're two highly advanced devotees. Just see the love of God that is manifesting when the two of them combine. So in this way, it mentions the rivers of joy of tears, the rivers of tears coming from the joy of seeing each other that these two manifested. Hair standing on end, quivering of the body, all of these different symptoms. So in this way they began to dance and chant with some great kirtan that was taking place at the time with each other. And eventually the kirtan finished, and then they began to speak to each other. And Nityananda Prabhu said to Madhavendra Puri, he said, Today I have completed the fulfillment of all of my pilgrimages. Remember, Nityananda had also just finished doing pilgrimage all over the world, all over India. He had been taken at the age of 11 or 13, I forget now, from the home of his mother and father, 11, from the home of his mother and father, Hadai Pandit and Padmavati, and traveled with Lakshmipati Tirtha. And then he had separated from him and gone to Vrindavan. And then in Vrindavan he meets Madhavendra Puri, and he expresses to him, I have traveled to all the holy places, but the fulfillment of my traveling to those holy places comes now today in seeing your form. With my own eyes I have beheld the lotus feet of Madhavendra Puri, therefore my life is now perfect. He was speaking in this way, and then holding Nityananda close to him, Madhavendra Puri was expressing the same thing. No, now I understand the real meaning of going on pilgrimage. So in this way they were appreciating each other like this. And it mentions that Madhavendra Puri was embracing Nityananda so closely he would not let him go. They were just so satisfied and fulfilled in the association of each other's. And it mentions that, headed by Brahmananda Puri, all of the associates of Madhavendra Puri could not take their eyes off the form of Nityananda. That the beauty of Lord Nityananda and the just the pure devotional mood of Lord Nityananda was just so amazing to them. They were completely absorbed like that. So in this way they began to discuss the difficulties of the age of Kali Yuga, and how so many wicked persons had become prominent in Kali Yuga, and they were diversing from the path of bhakti and devotional service like this. So in this way they began to discuss the pastimes of Krishna. And Nityananda traveled with Madhavendra Puri and his associates through all the different areas of Braj, and discussing the different leelas of Krishna's pastimes at the different places like this. Day and night, completely intoxicated in a mood of love of God. They laughed, they cried, they ranted, they raved, they had ecstatic kirtans, roaring chanting of the holy name like this. It was as if it mentions the two of them were simply like drunkards. Which they were. They were intoxicated on the holy name. So it mentions that Nityananda, in this mood, kept the association of Madhavendra Puri all throughout these talks and travels, and lost all meaning of time as they continued through Braj like this. So appreciating each other very much in that way. So at any rate, Madhavendra Puri and Nityananda continued this way for some time. And Nityananda mentions that he thought of Madhavendra Puri as his guru. Now, they were both initiated by the same personality. But Nityananda took Madhavendra Puri to be the senior. And worshipped his association in this way. And in the same way, Madhavendra Puri was appreciating the quality and the character of Nityananda as his intimate godbrother. So both of them were very much in this kind of mood. So, passing their way in this time, they eventually came to separate. Madhavendra Puri continued on his traveling. Actually, I believe, Madhavendra Puri stayed in Vrindavan at that time for some time longer. And then Nityananda, it mentions, he continued on to do his tours, and eventually, of course, we know he ended up in Navadvip. So in this way, they first met each other like that in Vrindavan. While in Vrindavan, Madhavendra Puri set the groundwork for the renovations of Vrindavan and the Vrindavan Leela Sthans that would come later by Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis under the direction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in this way, wandering from grove to grove throughout Vrindavan, he would engage in these pastimes. Now, of course, we know one of these amazing pastimes of Madhavendra Puri was when he was at Govardhan. And just if you go on the Govardhan Parakram now, just near Govindakund, just beyond Govindakund a bit is this small wooded forest area. Of course, at the time it was a much larger wooded area. There were no roads and arrangements for vehicles and footpaths and all. It would just Govardhan and the surrounding forest. So in this one place, Madhavendra Puri himself sat down to chant his japa. And after chanting for some hours, he dozed a little bit. Not actually took rest, but dozed a little bit. And in that dozing, he had a dream. And in that dream, Sri Gopal, the transcendental cowherd boy of Govardhan, came to him and said, when the Muslims came and attacked here, the pujaris hid me by burying me in the ground here. I have been staying here for so long, and now, as a result of that, I am very, very much suffering from the heat in the winter, summer, and the cold in the winter, and the rains and all. Please, you gather the villagers together and dig me up. So then Madhavendra Puri awoke, and he was quite amazed by this. He said, oh, this is an amazing dream. Now, just prior to this dream, I should mention that Madhavendra Puri, while he was chanting, one beautiful cowherd boy came to him. A beautiful young cowherd boy. Swami, he said, I understand that you're staying here and not taking any food, so the ladies have sent me with some milk for you. He said, the ladies have sent me. So how did they know that I was fasting? He said, oh, in our village no one fasts. And if someone does fast, then I provide their foodstuffs under the directions of the ladies in the village. So here I brought you this pot of milk. So he gave one pot of milk. And Madhavendra Puri said, oh, this is very kind. So he said, I will take this. If you just come back later, then I will give you the empty pot. So it mentions indeed that the boy just disappeared from the sight of Madhavendra Puri. So Madhavendra Puri thought, oh. So then he took the milk, he chanted, he dozed a little, had this dream, and then he realized that that cowherd boy was none other than Sri Krishna himself that had come to bring him this food. So he went and gathered all the local villagers to get shovels and rakes and different implements like that. And he went to the spot that had been instructed to him by Gopal, and they began to dig up the Gopal deity. Now this pastime is told in great, great detail in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Madhya Lila second volume. I forget the chapter number. Srila Prabhupada gives this entire story with wonderful purports about the establishing, the digging up and finding of the Gopal deity, how Madhavendra Puri arranged for him to be taken to the top of Govardhan Hill, and how he arranged a large stone slab for the stand for his asan, and another slab to be placed behind him, and then arranged for all the Brahmins to come, and cooking arrangements so the big Anakut were coming into the Kartik season. And the prime festival in the Kartik season is the Govardhan Puja Anakut ceremony. And how he arranged for, it gives detailed descriptions of mountains of chapatis dripping in ghee, and huge piles of rice laden with buckets of ghee, and pots upon pots of sabjis, and huge, huge preparations, and all kinds of sweets. All this was arranged by Madhavendra Puri for the establishing the worship of Sri Gopal. Now, of course, prior to that was the Abhishek, and there's a very, very long discussion of the Abhishek. And Srila Prabhupada mentions in there that this is the method by which one can learn how to perform the deity worship, by following this chapter. So then, of course, Madhavendra Puri is arranging for the deity service and clothing and prasadam, and several Brahmins come and he initiates Brahmins and teaches them in the method of worship like this. And he arranges all of this for the pleasure of Sri Gopal. And with the idea in mind that this will cool the discomfort of Gopal, who has been residing in this buried condition and suffering greatly from the heat and everything. So in this way, Madhavendra Puri establishes the worship of Gopal. This title, this chapter is entitled in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, The Wonderful Qualities and Service of Sri Madhavendra Puri. Very, very nice. In this process, Madhavendra Puri has a dream again, and Gopal appears to him and says, "It's not working. I'm still suffering very much from the heat. Please, if you go to Jagannath Puri, they have near Jagannath Puri is a forest that's specifically known for sandalwood. If you get some sandalwood and some camphor from there and bring that back to me, then I'll be very, very happy." He gives them a specific quantity. He says, "This will give me great satisfaction, and then I will be able to be satisfied in my relief from this discomfort." So Madhavendra Puri instructs all the Brahmins, "Okay, I'm going on this journey. Now you do this, you do that, you prepare like this, you prepare like that." And Madhavendra Puri goes on his way. Now, in this process, he stops in the temple of Ramuna, which is just outside of Puri in the state of Orissa. And he sees the wonderful worship of the Gopinath deity there. Now, in the Gopinath temple, they offer a sweet rice to the Lord, which is very, very nice sweet rice. So Madhavendra Puri thinks to himself, if I could get a taste of this sweet rice, which is famous here, then I would know how they make it. Now, this is an example of what an expert cook he was. Because an expert cook, he will taste something, okay, this has some of that in it, you put this spice in there, you cooked it in this manner with this type of oil, because they're very, knowledgeable like that. So Madhavendra Puri thought, if I can get a taste of this sweet rice, then I will understand how it is prepared, and I can prepare the same thing and offer it to my Sri Gopal. As soon as he thought like that, he chastised himself. "Oh, just see. You're thinking to taste the prasadam of the Lord before the Lord is even finished with it. This is not the proper mentality for a devotee. How to enjoy your senses. You're not qualified to be here." So he immediately, in great embarrassment, left the Gopinath temple. Now, that evening, when the Lord was put to sleep, interesting thing happened. The Pujari put the Lord to bed and then took his rest, and the Pujari had a dream. And in the dream, Gopinath said, "My dear Pujari, please wake up. I have hidden one of the pots of sweet rice you offered behind the curtain on my altar. There is one devotee, Madhavendra Puri, who desires to taste this. He is staying in an abandoned stall in the marketplace overnight, sleeping there quietly in great humility. You take this, wake up now, come and get this pot off my altar, and take this and give it to him." So the Pujari wakes up. Now, Pujaris, when they have dreams about the deity, it's something special. Our Jananivas and Pankajangari, who reside in Mayapur taking care of Radha Madhava, can tell you about some of the dreams they've had, if any of you ever get the opportunity to go there. And when a Pujari of that caliber has a dream about Krishna, this is very special. So the Pujari immediately prepared himself, bathing, and went in and woke didn't wake the deity, but went behind the curtain, and there he found the pot of sweet rice. So he took this pot and he went into the village, the local village, and he went to the marketplace and he called out, "Madhavendra Puri, where is Madhavendra Puri? Where is that most fortunate person, Madhavendra Puri? Sri Gopinath has stolen this pot of sweet rice for you." So in this way, Madhavendra Puri heard him and identified himself, and the Pujari offered great respect and delivered the sweet rice. Madhavendra Puri tasted the sweet rice, was very, very satisfied by his taste, could understand or prepare it this way and that way. And then he was so amazed by the story the Pujari told him that he thought even the bowl, that this was the cup, the clay cup, this was in a special. So he broke that and tied it in his cloth, and every day he would take one piece of that and eat it. Very, very advanced devotee. So in this way he continued on. He went to Jagannath Puri. He arranged through the king to collect the different sandalwood and camphor. To transport these things back in those days was not allowed. There was some restrictions on that, so he got the proper papers and had to go, as we mentioned before, the different boundaries were run by Muslims and different zamindars, and you had to pay taxes. So he had a letter from the king, said, no, this great devotee can just take this, don't charge any tax, let him go, it's okay, he hasn't stolen this. His transportation papers, as you would call them. His, what do they call that? Bill of lading, his bill of lading. So in this way, he returned on his way through to Remuna. And when he was in Remuna, he had another dream. And Gopinath, Gopal, his Gopal in Vrindavan, appeared to him and said, my dear Madhavendra Puri, with great effort you are undertaking this difficulty on my behalf. I do not like to see my devotees suffer. So therefore, while you are in Remuna, arrange for this sandalwood to be ground and applied to the body of Gopinath. My body is Gopal and Gopinath's body are not different. Gopinath will accept this, and in this way I will be satisfied. Now this is a very important point. There's 2 points to make from this. One is that the Lord is non-different in all of his deity forms. We should not think, oh, I'm here in Alachua and I'm worshiping Radha Shamsundar, but if I go to New York and worship Radha Govinda, this is a different Lord. I have to let him know everything and arrange everything separate. It's the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. He manifests himself in so many ways. The example Prabhupada gives is just like you take a lamp, a candle, and you light so many candles from that. They all have the same potency. So in the same way, all the forms of the deity have that potency. So Gopal was instructing Madhavendra Puri that I am not different than Gopinath, you offer to him. And that Krishna does not want to see his devotees suffer. Krishna wants to see what is the devotional quality and characteristic of my devotee. He may make some test, but then when he sees that, all right, now you don't have to worry. So these are both the points that are made by this wonderful pastime. In this way, Madhavendra Puri stayed in Remuna and arranged for the preparations to be offered to Gopinath deity there. And this deity, by the way, at this point became known as Kshira-chora Gopinatha. The Gopinath deity that stole Kora, the Kshira, the sweet rice, for Madhavendra Puri, like that. So Prabhupada mentions how Krishna likes to be identified by his association with his devotees. Nanda Nandana, the son of Nandana. Jasoda Nandana, the son of Jasoda. You know, Brajendra Nandana, the sweetheart of Braj. So in this way, Krishna wants to be identified by his contact with his devotees. So Kshira-chora Gopinatha is identified as that person who stole the sweet rice. For who? For Madhavendra Puri. So in this way, the ceremony, the life of Madhavendra Puri stayed for some time there in Remuna. And in the meantime, if we go back to Vrindavan, the Gopal deity, the Muslims have invaded, and the pujaris have moved the deity safely to Rajasthan. And the deity is now worshipped there in Nathdwar. Nathji deity as he's known now. And this is where one can find that Gopal deity. So at any rate, Madhavendra Puri then is winding up his pastimes and preparing to leave this world. And he's staying in the Remuna area there. And he's served by his disciples. Now one of his disciples, we mentioned many names at the beginning, one of these disciples is called Ramchandra Puri. And Ramchandra Puri had the exact opposite mood of the prominent disciple of Madhavendra Puri, Ishvara Puri. Ishvara Puri's mood was one of submission, humility, free from guile, free from any bad qualities. And in this way, he served Madhavendra Puri very, very carefully. And how did he serve Madhavendra Puri? As Madhavendra Puri was leaving from this world, what does it mean to leave this body? Here in Alachua in recent months, we've had several devotees leave their body. And it means that the body begins to break down. One loses control over the bodily functions. The process of passing waste, passing stools and urine, this just happens while one is laying there in bed in an invalid condition. It requires someone to care for that person. So in this way, Ishvara Puri was taking that position of humbly cleaning his spiritual master's body from this circumstance of his preparing to depart from this world. And in that mood of departure, he was absorbing himself in the pastimes of this mood that he introduced to our line. And this idea that, separation from Krishna is the highest form, this lamentation, this anxiety of separation, he was verbalizing this. Now, the disciple Ramchandra Puri could not appreciate this. He had not imbibed that service mood. And he came before his spiritual master on Madhavendra Puri's deathbed as he was departing this world and preached to him, "Oh, my dear spiritual master, you should not be in anxiety. You should not be feeling separation. You should simply be appreciating the Brahman. You should simply be appreciating the presence of the spiritual energy, and no need for all of this distress and lamentation and anxiety." So in this way, Madhavendra Puri banned him. He said, "Get out of my sight." He said, "If I leave this world seeing you, I will not attain that goal for which I hanker. So you get away from me." So in this way, he was not very fortunate. And indeed, after Madhavendra Puri left, his nature amongst all the devotees in Puri was to criticize and find fault. What can be expected of one who even tries to instruct his own spiritual master and cannot appreciate the mood of the Guru? How can he appreciate the mood of his god brothers and other devotees? Therefore, Ramchandra Puri was not very much appreciated. He was not a person that the devotees liked to have around, because he was always criticizing. On the opposite, we see that Ishvara Puri embraced that mood. Now, what was this verse, this mood that Madhavendra Puri had? Well, when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited Ramuna with Nityananda and shared the story of Gopal and Madhavendra Puri's pastimes, which is told in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this mood of Vipralamba Bhav, this mood of separation, was enhanced. First of all, the different places where this is described, Lord Chaitanya referred to in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 10th canto, the Krishna Karnamrita, the Gitamrita, Padyavali, the Gita Govinda, Padyavali, places like this. These are all the poems and writings and songs which express this mood. And there was one particular mood that was spoken by Madhavendra Puri that Mahaprabhu related to the devotees. And I'll just read the translation here again. This is in the fourth chapter. This is the chapter in Chaitanya Charitamrita of the Madhya Lila. And that translation is, "O my compassionate Lord, O Lord of the poor and the humble, O Lord of Mathura, when shall I see you again? Without seeing you, my heart has become very much afflicted. O my beloved, I am overwhelmed as a result. What shall I do now?" So this is the mood that brought about this love. Now it mentions that this verse is the Kastuba jewel of all verses, the most rare sloka capturing this mood that Madhavendra Puri brought into our sampradaya, that Mahaprabhu embraced. And it mentions that this verse was originally spoken by Srimati Radharani, and that there are 3 people and 3 people alone that understand the meaning of this verse: Srimati Radharani, Madhavendra Puri, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That there is no fourth. Chaitanya Charitamrita explains like this. So even reciting a few words from this verse, the door to the heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's love for Krishna would just burst open, and he would just fall into an ecstatic mood in this way, taking up this mood that the verse represented and taking up the mood that Madhavendra Puri brought with it, and understanding that to all come from Srimati Radharani, who Mahaprabhu was anyway, in that mood like that. So this was the entire teaching and mood of separation that Madhavendra Puri brought, and that he imparted to Ishvara Puri, and that Ishvara Puri then passed on to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is the information we have available. We would encourage anyone that has the opportunity that they should definitely dive into the Madhya Lila chapter 4, the pastimes of Madhavendra Puri. Very, very sweet, and Srila Prabhupada's purports in that chapter are so, so wonderful. So from there, Madhavendra Puri will now move on to his prominent disciple Ishvara Puri. Krishnadas Kaviraj describes, as I mentioned, that this sprout of love of God was Madhavendra Puri, and the young sapling was Ishvara Puri, and the full-grown tree was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this mood was completely transferred from Madhavendra Puri to Ishvara Puri. Now, Ishvara Puri was born in the town of Kumarahat. Kumarahat is a very, very nice place. Many wonderful devotees come from there. It's a place that's known as a seat of Gaudiya Vaishnava pastimes. This is actually where Srivas and his brothers lived after Mahaprabhu's Navadvip pastimes finished and Mahaprabhu went to Puri. Srivas and his brothers Sri Nalini, Sri Pati, and Sri... I can't remember the fourth one. They couldn't stand living in Navadvip anymore because everywhere they turned, all they saw was memories of the pastimes of the Lord. So they moved to Kumarahat. So in this place of Kumarahat was previously where Ishvara Puri had taken his birth. And so this was a very, very wonderful Vaishnava place. Now, Ishvara Puri is the sannyas name. And prior to that, his previous life and his previous name are not known. We do know that his father's name was Sham Sundar Acharya. And Sham Sundar Acharya gave birth to the son and, was the father of the son. And beyond that, there's no information that's readily available. I'm sure somewhere out there in some forgotten Vaishnava writing is the life of Ishvara Puri. Maybe in this lifetime, if I'm fortunate, I'll find that. But for the sake of this presentation, all we know is that his father's name was Sham Sundar Acharya, that he took birth in Kumarahat, and that it ultimately took initiation from Madhavendra Puri. The nature of Madhavendra Puri's devotional service we described previously, just a few moments ago in the life of Madhavendra Puri. The nature of Ishvara Puri's devotional service we described in relationship to his service to Madhavendra Puri and his mood of humility. Not only did he manifest that mood of humility in the type of service he rendered to his spiritual master when he became invalid, but always engaged in chanting of the holy name, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra during that time, and in assisting his spiritual master by reminding him of different pastimes of the Lord. This is the mood of a proper disciple, to assist the spiritual master in remembering Krishna. So Madhavendra Puri did like this, and was very pleasing to Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri said to Ishvara Puri upon his service in that way, he gave him, "May you be blessed with Krishna Prema." And so this Krishna Prema did manifest, and the additional benediction which Ishvara Puri received was to become the spiritual master of of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Prabhupada points out in this connection a very important point here, that the mercy of the spiritual master is what causes one to develop perfection in their devotional life. That a Vaishnava is always protected by the personality of Godhead, but if he appears to be invalid, this gives a chance to the disciple to perfect his service to the spiritual master and thus ultimately get the blessings of the spiritual master. So this we saw in our own relationship with Srila Prabhupada in his final pastimes. As his body became invalid, some of us were fortunate enough to be there and render some menial services like that to Srila Prabhupada. So after his youthful pastimes and his getting initiated by Madhavendra Puri and Madhavendra Puri's departure, then Ishvara Puri began to travel to different holy places. And one of the holy places he travels to is Navadvip, to the seat of Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is present in his Navadvip Leela as a young boy, Nimai Pandit at this time. And so Ishvara Puri, traveling in this way, stays in Navadvip at the home of Gopinatha Acharya. And so in this time period at the home of Gopinatha Acharya, he goes out, during the day on different pilgrimage and chanting and going around like that. And he comes to know that Advaita Acharya is living just nearby in Krishna Nagar. Not Krishna Nagar. Excuse me, I lose the memory of it now. At any rate, that Advaita Acharya is just nearby and residing there. So Ishvara Puri goes, because remember, Advaita Acharya is his godbrother. They were both initiated by Madhavendra Puri. So, but Ishvara Puri is a bit in disguise, kind of covering his actual identity, not letting it known. So he comes to the place where Advaitacharya is, and Shantipur, there we go, I remember it. So Advaitacharya is in Shantipur, so Ishvara Puri goes there. And when he arrives there, he's not appearing to be a Vaishnava sannyasi. Now, at that time, Advaitacharya had Mukunda with him, Mukunda Datta. Mukunda Datta, as you all remember, is a very excellent kirtan singer. So Advaitacharya sees that this personality has come, and he says, my dear brother, who are you? You seem like you might be a Vaishnava sannyasi. You're not appearing in that way, though. And so Ishvara Puri replies to him. He says, I am just a low-class Sudra. I simply come here to take the darshan of your lotus feet. And Mukunda also heard this exchange and could understand that, no, he is disguising who he really is. So Mukunda hatched a plan, and he began to sing some beautiful song glorifying Sri Krishna. And when he sang this verse, actually Vrindavan Das Thakur mentions, who can resist the kirtan of Mukunda? Who will not be moved by Mukunda's kirtan? So in this way, he began to sing. And then hearing this kirtan, Ishvara Puri fell to the ground in ecstasy and began to manifest all the symptoms of love of God. So the devotees present, Mukunda and others, they said, we haven't seen a devotee of this caliber in so long. And Advaitacharya went over and he raised him up and he deeply embraced him, put him to his chest, and he said, it is you, Ishvara Puri. You tried to hide your identity from me, but you were not successful. And then the entire assembly of devotees broke into an uproarious kirtan, chanting the holy name and dancing in great ecstasy. And in this way, everyone had just this very, very wonderful time. So in this way, Ishvara Puri lived in the Navadvip area for some time, staying at Gopinath, associating with Advaitacharya like that. Now, one day, he happened to meet Nimai Pandit on the footpath as they were both walking. Now, many people assume falsely that the first time Mahaprabhu met Ishvara Puri was when he went to Gaya and took initiation from him. But this is actually not correct. Ishvara Puri was living in Navadvip prior to Mahaprabhu accepting sannyas, living there temporarily, and he actually met him one day prior to his giving him initiation in Gaya. So he happened to see him coming by. Mahaprabhu was returning from his school studies. It's not clear whether he had already established his own school or whether he was attending a school, but he was returning. And upon seeing Mahaprabhu, Ishvara Puri was completely amazed by the perfect physical form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his extremely grave disposition, his mindset like that. Now, this is completely different than the other mood that some of the associates of Mahaprabhu got to see, because this is the same time at which Mahaprabhu was constantly arguing with this one and that one and causing disruption. So in this way, he was becoming a bit more grave as he entered into his preparing for his sannyas lila. He had not yet finished up the Navadvip pastimes. So Ishvara Puri called out to him, "Oh, best of the Brahmanas, what is your name? Where is your home? And what is it that you are reading?" So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in great humility, offered his obeisances to Ishvara Puri, understanding him to be an advanced Vaishnava sannyasi. And Mahaprabhu's disciples all said, "You do not know?" So this must have been because it was his disciples, right? So this would have been after he had established his school. So the disciples all said, "You do not know? This is the famous Nimai Pandit." And Ishvara Puri said, "You are the Nimai Pandit? I have had the chance to now meet Nimai Pandit. I have heard so much about you." So it mentions that Ishvara Puri's joy knew no bounds upon getting the opportunity to meet Nimai Pandit. But that Mahaprabhu felt quite the opposite. He felt extremely humble and bowed his head and said, "My Shripad," he said, "if you please have mercy upon me, come to my home, bless my home, and give me your company and allow me to provide you with your meals." So in this way, Ishvara Puri said, "All right, I will come." So Ishvara Puri came to the home of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and at that time Mata Sachi prepared some nice prasadam, and it mentions that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed the lotus feet of Ishvara Puri when he came into his home. And not only just poured the water, but washed and dried with his own hands the lotus feet of Ishvara Puri. And that Mother Sachi prepared different types of foods and offered them to the deity. Shalagram Shila that they worshipped, but it was a Kurma Shila. And then prepared those and then gave those Mahaprasad to Mahaprabhu. And then Mahaprabhu gave that Mahaprasad to Ishvara Puri in this way. So then they entered into the temple of Lord Vishnu just after that, and they sat and discussed the pastimes of the Lord, different topics of Krishna Katha for quite some time. And then eventually it mentions the mood of Krishna Prema sprang up in their conversations and flooded the room in their hearts with Prema Bhakti, and love of God had manifested from them in this way. So for 1 month, Ishvara Puri stayed at the home of Gopinath and would come regularly to Mahaprabhu's home for his lunch and engage in Krishna Katha. So we see that there was some foundation being built for Mahaprabhu meeting Ishvara Puri later in Gaya. So in this way, Mahaprabhu would invite him and they would share the pastime. So this is the beginning. Now, during this time, Gadadhar was a young boy. You remember that he was younger than Mahaprabhu, and Ishvara Puri was very, very affectionate to him, and he would be in this group of devotees and all that they would see. And so he would read to Gadadhar from a book he had written, that Ishvara Puri had written, called Sri Krishna Lilamrita. Now, every day after sunrise, when Mahaprabhu got up and performed his activities, he would come before Ishvara Puri and he would offer obeisances to him. Because here again, this is very close. Gopinath's house is not that far, so we'd go by like that. And so one day, Ishvara Puri said to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said, "You are the topmost of pundits. You are a very learned personality." He says, "I am writing this book about Krishna's pastimes. And if you would be so kind, if you could please look at it and point out whatever faults and shortcomings are there, please make any corrections. If you would do this, it would give me great pleasure." So sitting at the lotus feet of Ishvara Puri, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke these words. He said, "The words of Krishna's devotees are as good as Krishna speaking himself. They are in the same category as Krishna. They are from the alphabet of Krishna. They are not from a material alphabet. Such words are not to be considered mundane. Anyone who would find fault with the words of Krishna's devotees is a great sinner. What a bhakta writes is not merely just poetry. It is completely different. It is dear to Krishna and therefore it is perfect. A devotee's prayers of love for Krishna have nothing to do with the rules of grammar and do not depend upon those rules of grammar. Krishna is only interested in the love that is expressed in such prayers. Those prayers are dear to Krishna in any case, whether they are written properly or not according to the rules of grammar and logic and poetry. One who looks for the faults in such words of a devotee will never please Sri Krishna." So when Ishvara Puri heard these words from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it says he felt as if his entire body had been drenched with the pure nectar. So Ishvara Puri could understand, this Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as I expected, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So anyway, a few days later, then Ishvara Puri left, and he continued on his pilgrimage, leaving Navadvipa. So in this way, the pastimes of Lord Gaurasundar's scholarship and Grihastha life wound themselves up. They began to come to an end. And Mahaprabhu wanted to reveal his divine identity and drench the world, it mentions, in the nectar of the holy name, and to spread this Krishna Prema all throughout the world. But in the particular circumstances he was in, that would not be able. That would not be able to be done. So he made a plan to take sannyas. But before doing that, he wanted to go to Gaya and perform the final rites for his father who had departed. This was a proper thing for his son to do, is to go to Gaya and perform the Pinda ceremony, the last rites for the father. So at that time, residing in Gaya was Ishvara Puri. Ishvara Puri had left Navadvipa and traveled and is now staying in Gaya. So after some time in Gaya, Mahaprabhu finished his offering to the lotus feet of Vishnu. There's a Vishnu deity there that one goes and offers prayers on behalf of the forefathers for their deliverance. And he had finished this activity and had taken care of his responsibilities. And when he went to the temple of Lord Vishnu at that time, he began to chant with his associates the holy name of the Lord. And in this way, being in front of the deity of Lord Vishnu and taking up the holy name in kirtan, he began completely overwhelmed in ecstasy and fainted to the ground. Now, one of the devotees present at that time was Chandrasekharacharya. And Chandrasekharacharya could understand who Mahaprabhu was and immediately sent for Ishvara Puri. So that when Mahaprabhu returned to external consciousness, Ishvara Puri was right there by him. So at once Mahaprabhu arose and offered his obeisances to Ishvara Puri. And it mentions at that time the two of them embraced one another. And that they were now, at this point, they were embracing and tears were coming from their eyes. And they began to experience all the devotional symptoms. I mean, we can see these things are very high caliber of relationships between the Vaishnavas. And then, as we saw in exchanges between Nityananda and Madhavendra Puri, Mahaprabhu began to say, now my visit to this holy place of Gaya has borne the fruit that it should have. For by coming here, I have now had the shelter of your lotus feet again. By traveling to all the holy places and offering pinda, one may deliver one's ancestors. That is for the person who delivers pinda. But only by, but one will attain eternal deliverance by taking shelter at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava such as you. So in this way, Mahaprabhu was appreciating the benefits of his having gone to Gaya and performed the pinda for his father, but additionally his being able to take the shelter at the lotus feet of Ishvara Puri. So in this way, with great humility, Mahaprabhu said to Ishvara Puri, he said, all of my visiting has now become purified because you yourself are the real tirtha. You are the holy place because all of the knowledge of the holy places resides within you. So in this way, he spent some time there and would listen and hear from Ishvara Puri. Ishvara Puri said to him, he said, my dear Pandit, he said, please listen. Upon seeing your learning and your divine character, I can understand that you are the divine personality of Godhead himself. You have descended among men simply for our benefit. This very day I had a beautiful dream in the morning. In my dream I saw many people with fruit, laden with fruit in their hands. O Pandit, I speak this truthfully. Upon seeing you, I had this unusual feeling of transcendental bliss that one does not get from ordinary circumstances. In fact, after seeing you in Navadvipdham when I was visiting there, from that time forward I could not think of anything other than you. I did not want to know anything else other than associating with you. I am speaking the truth to you at this time. Upon seeing you, I felt as happy as if I had seen Sri Krishna himself. So hearing this, Mahaprabhu lowered his head and in great humility said, I am most fortunate by your association. So we see this wonderful mood. Mahaprabhu is the personality of Godhead, no doubt. But Ishvara Puri is taking the role of his instructing guru at this point, soon to be his Diksha Guru. Taking the role in that way, so they're trading off their appreciation of each other and their feelings of humility. Now, one thing it mentions that Ishvara Puri cites that he had a dream, and in that dream, the people were bearing fruit in their hands. It mentions in the understanding of dreams that if you have a dream in the later morning before waking and people are bearing fruit in their hands, whatever is taking place in that dream will come to pass. Whatever you're thinking in that way. So, and anyway, after some days of staying in Gaya, Mahaprabhu, in a mood of great humility, approached Ishvara Puri, and he said, Your Holiness, please, I beg that you show mercy and initiate me into the Gayatri Mantra. Accept me as your disciple. For want of the Gayatri Mantra, my mind cannot find any peace. So in this way, Ishvara Puri was very, very happy, and he said, whether I give you these words, or whether you accept them from your own heart, it will not matter. But I wish to give you everything that I have, and therefore I will impart this to you. So in this way he accepted him. We know that he initiated him at that time in Gaya, and then upon returning to Navadvip, Lord Chaitanya began to manifest full-blown his mood of love of God in the beginning of his plans for spreading love of God in this way. So it mentions that let me just grab my train of thought. You can erase this part. Space it out here.
Sure.
Yes. Before leaving Gaya, after taking initiation, it mentions that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again invited Ishvara Puri to the place where he was staying for prasadam. And that in coming to that place, he offered obeisances, made all the proper arrangements for him, and begged that Ishvara Puri would stay for prasadam. And Ishvara Puri said, I will consider myself extremely fortunate if I am able to accept rice from your own lotus hand. So here again, even after giving initiation, still this mood of humility was exchanged between the two of them. And Mahaprabhu never accepted that. He always would then offer some humble response like that. So he then cooked and he offered and prepared the food and gave it to Ishvara Puri. And then with his own lotus hand, he took sandalwood paste and smeared it onto the body of Madhavendra Puri and put a garland on his neck. So in this way, he showed how one should worship the spiritual master, acquainted us with the process of giving all respect and praise to one's guru. So in this way, playing this role as a disciple, he set the proper standard for us. And then he left the association of Ishvara Puri and he returned to Navadvip. And as we mentioned, upon returning to Navadvip, he began to manifest a full-blown mood of love of Godhead. Now, on his way back to Navadvip, he had to pass through Kumar Hut. And when passing through Kumar Hut, he stopped and he was so happy upon being at the birthplace of his spiritual master, he took one handful of dust from that place, some dirt, and wrapped it into his outer cloth. Now it mentions that following in his footsteps, many devotees in his association and others that came after him also took from that same spot Mahaprabhu had taken some dust, to the point to where there's now one large lake there, one kund that is formed and filled with water from the rain, and this is called the Chaitanya Doba. This is the place where Lord Chaitanya has taken the dust of his spiritual master's birthplace and worshipped that. So this is a very holy place to go to. So eventually it mentions in due course of time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, renounced this world, and went to live in Jagannath Puri under the instructions of his mother. And at that time, Ishvara Puri began to wrap up his pastimes. That he had no further need to be here. His express purpose was to give initiation to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu under the line coming from Madhavendra Puri, and to pass that fruit of love of Godhead down in that chain in that way. And so in this way he began to finish his pastimes. And as he was departing from this world, he had two very prominent disciples, Govinda, Kashishwar Pandit. These were Ishvara Puri's disciples, and he sent them to Puri and told them to be the personal servants of Mahaprabhu. And in Mahaprabhu's later pastimes, you'll find these two names, Govinda and Kashishwar Pandit, both mentioned very prominently in the services to Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri. So in this way, we have this example of spiritual master to disciple in the teachings of Ishvara Puri. Now, Mahaprabhu was understood by Ishvara Puri, as I mentioned, to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But as he was playing the role of his guru, he gave him instructions. And these are 4 particular instructions that Ishvara Puri imparted unto Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The first one he departed to him. In the age of Kali, there are no principles of religion, save and except the chanting of the holy names. This chanting of the holy names is the essence and the purport of all scriptures. The second point he made. By chanting the holy name, one gets freedom from material existence, and thus being freed from material existence, one will be qualified for the darshan of the Supreme Lord. The third point, he says there are 4 principles of material life: economic development, sense gratification, religiosity, and liberation. But there is a 5th principle, and that is love of Godhead. And before this 5th principle of love of Godhead, the other 4 take the straw from their street and fold it in their hands in humility. And then the 4th instruction he gave was that, my dear boy, you should simply continue this chanting of the holy name, this dancing, this sankirtan, this association with the devotees, sadhu sangha, and thus spread Krishna Nam and deliver all those who are fallen in this age of Kali. So these are the 4 instructions given by Ishvara Puri. And this is a mood and a list of suitable instructions that can be applicable to all of us in our devotional service. So we'll finish there, having spoken about Madhavendra Puri, that sprout of love of Godhead, how it manifested into the sapling of Ishvara Puri, and how that full-bloomed into the tree of devotional service as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So once again, we thank you very much for joining us this evening. and we bring to close another chapter in the lives of the Vaishnava Acharyas. Hare Krishna.